Cloud. All right, Jaclyn, I will hand it over to you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Do you see me as a little tiny head on the screen or no?
Yes,
Okay.
right. I can
I was
make
like, I
sure.
can unshare so I'm not just an
I
amorphous
was gonna say
voice.
I can let's see, maybe if I spotlight you.
Um, it's fine. It's fine. You'll want to see the slideshow than me. So, well, thanks everybody for letting me crash your class for a few minutes. So my name's Jaclyn Napoleon. I'm the director of graduate admissions for Rockefeller. So, for those of you who are obviously political science, public administration, criminal justice. Rockefeller is your academic home. And so I oversee all of the recruitment and admissions processes for students who are looking for master's degree programs and PhD programs in public affairs and policy and criminal justice. So I've been at this a long time. So I think I have a good idea of what you want to start thinking about for any of you who are considering graduate school. I think the best way to sort of look at what might be next for you is to think about some of the things that you're passionate about and what your purpose is. And so, how I sort of illustrate this is through this graphic. And if you can find this combination, you're sort of lucky and you've found the ideal. But if you can find even most of this, I think it's something to think about as you endeavor to challenge yourself at that next phase. So it's about finding passion mission in a profession that someone will pay you for. So you all are already doing the things because you're interning, you're getting engaged in your field, you're finding a way to pursue the passion and interests you've developed thus far. So if you're able to find something that you love, that you're good at, that the world needs, and that someone will pay you for, then you're on a great track. One of my favorite things about working in public affairs in general is that the students who are in these fields, you all want to go out and change the world and make it a better place. And there's just no better calling, in my opinion, than that. So, congrats for already starting that path. So, I'll shift a little bit and I'm going to talk sort of generally about graduate programs. And then I'll talk specifically about Rockefeller only because that's obviously what's here at UAlbany. And for some of you who don't know, UAlbany is home to some of the best public affairs graduate programs you can find. So, some of you, I'm sure, are thinking about law school. I would imagine some of you have thought about that. Maybe some of you are thinking about a more academically based program, perhaps a PhD. Maybe some of you are thinking about a professional degree. And really, the difference between them is significant. So, a law degree is sort of standard, teaches you how to be a lawyer, can prepare you for a lot of different avenues depending on the kind of law you're interested in pursuing. But it's 3 years, it's significant time, significant expense. I think a really specific kind of person wants to pursue law school. And if you're not sure if that's you, I always recommend thinking about some alternatives to have just in case as you're exploring them. So, as I mentioned, academic degree programs, there could be an MA or an MS. You're interested in content area, you're interested in research potentially, maybe academia. You really want to delve deeper into some of the theories and ideas of a subject area. A professional degree like an MPA, like an MBA, like a master's of social work, these are the kinds of degrees that are expected to be terminal. So once you've done these, you are now trained to do XYZ. And most of them are training you to be a professional in a career. So whether that's social welfare, an MPA, the Masters of Public Administration. So you're trained to work in the public sector, whether that's in government or nonprofits. Masters of Public Health. So these are programs that sort of give you the combination of obviously classroom and foundations experience, but typically has some sort of work or internship requirement along with it and focuses on professional skills. So that's a really big piece of it where the skills are leading directly to a job, whereas that doesn't necessarily find its way into some of the other graduate programs. So we'll come back to that in a little bit, but I do want to think a little bit about what you want to be doing now. So there are some really easy things you can be doing now and some that are a little tougher. But I think the big things is that you have so many resources available to you right here in Rockefeller. You're in one of them now. You're all doing an internship, so that's done. And you know, Christina, Joan, those are your career people. And so you're lucky enough to have a career office right within your academic unit. And not every academic unit has that. So you really are lucky to have access to so many different employment resources as you're looking for some sort of a practical experience. The hope is that when you're going throughout your academic career, you're looking to challenge yourself academically, certainly in your major, but a lot of times that can come with taking classes perhaps you didn't necessarily want to take or think you would need to take or hadn't thought about before. And those primarily, I encourage students to think about doing so in the quantitative area. And so what that means is something in statistics, something in microeconomics, using numbers, knowing how to analyze data. Those become really, really important skills as you move into a graduate program. One of the great things for those of you in Rockefeller, we have PAD 316, which is a statistics class, but it's taught from like a social sciences perspective. So the cool thing about some of the graduate programs I'll talk about is that they're designed around a social sciences perspective. So you're not having like a mathematician teach you statistics, you're having a social scientist teach you them. So it becomes less intimidating for any of you who haven't taken a ton of math, or you're like, oh gosh, I haven't taken that since high school. Those are the kind of courses you want to embrace because those skills are really essential. So I always encourage a stats and micro. Those are a good place to start. I'm sure many of you are involved on campus, which is great. If you're involved in student organizations, I think those are really valuable ways to be involved. And I think one thing I'll add to that is also if you have a job that's not related to school, that's okay too. If you have a part-time job, you work at the mall, you work down the street, you work in the dining hall, whatever it is, like those are great experiences too. Meanwhile, though, as a student, we want to make sure that you're pursuing relationships with your faculty. They become incredibly important, which we'll talk about in a little bit later. Find someone who can sort of help you through this process if you're thinking about graduate school. I don't know where to start. I think I want to do a degree because I really want to focus my efforts in this certain area, but I don't know how to do that. Faculty become really good resources in that area. And then sort of thinking a little bit further down the road, if law school, some graduate programs require these standardized tests. The LSAT is the law school entrance exam. The GRE is sort of the SAT for graduate school. The GMAT's more for business school. That's probably not something you guys would necessarily need, but these are the types of things you want to think about. Not all programs require them, but it is an important thing to think about now. And then when you're looking at programs, you want to do your research. You want to talk a little bit to the students, the faculty who are there. Everyone is more than happy to talk about their programs. And that includes here at Rockefeller. If you're like, you know what, I'm thinking about an MPA, but I don't really know some of the faculty that teach in that program, reach out anytime. And that certainly doesn't end at UAlbany. It really is anywhere you're pursuing. If you're looking at law schools and you'd like to connect with somebody at Albany Law, let us know. We can connect you with them. Talk with students. A lot of times I connect prospective students that I work with current students here at UAlbany, and that's really helpful as they're looking for PhD programs or master's programs. Think about things like accreditation and job placement. Those are really important because it shows the quality of the program. If you're accredited by the sort of governing body of your field like we are, that's sort of saying, all right, we've met the gold standard of this discipline. And then same goes for job placements. You want to brag about your job placement. We certainly brag about that because our students do really well out of our graduate program. So that's an important thing that you want to know. Am I going to be looking and searching for a job for a year, or am I going to have one upon graduation? Those are important questions to ask. And that goes to the sort of next point of connecting with alumni. I love to connect students with our alumni because it really shows them how they got to where they are based on what they did in their graduate degree. Location is something that may matter, it may not. I think one of the things just as an example, because we're in Albany, the state capital, is that Albany, because it is such a large seat of government, it's already this perfect springboard to the next thing, whether that is starting your career here out of your grad program, or and staying here forever, or maybe it's staying here for 2 or 3 years and then you decide you want to go to New York or DC, or you want to do something abroad. It's such a great place to start. And so locations can be important, but they're not the end all be all. So if you're like, gosh, I kind of want to go to DC, but boy, is it expensive, put it off a couple years, spend some time in Albany, save some money, be able to then relocate when you're ready. Because cost, funding, that type of stuff for graduate school, it's not guaranteed everywhere you go and can vary extensively across the board. I always encourage students to set realistic expectations for graduate school. Every graduate school is not requiring a 4.0. That's actually fairly rare. I think most programs are looking for a good, strong student. Lots of A's, lots of B's, some B pluses. That's the kind of student that they want to see, is done consistently well over time. If you had 1 or 2 bad grades because you came in as a freshman as a biology major and learned very quickly that was not the right path for you, those aren't necessarily going to disqualify you just because you had a couple of poor grades your first year. So it's important about consistency over time. So as long as your most recent work has been strong, you've challenged yourself, that's great. I sort of going back to the test scores, just to reiterate, you want to find out if they matter, if they're required. Do you need to even worry about it at all? And then going back to the work or internship experience, obviously you're all interning, which is great. Most schools don't require it, but I think it really can boost your application a bit to have done some real work in your field. And it can be really a work across the board. As I said, you're all doing something directly in your field, which is fantastic. But as I mentioned, a part-time job, doing something professional outside of the classroom goes a long way regardless of what it is. So I'll sort of shift gears a little bit and talk about UAlbany, because obviously this is the programs I know the best, but they're good examples of how these programs are structured, not just here, but at lots of other schools. So I'll be able to give you kind of an overview, and then of course I certainly want to be able to answer any questions that you all have. So we have a selection of, we have 4 different master's programs in Rockefeller. We have PhD programs, we have graduate certificate programs, and we have combined degree programs, which put together your current 4-year degree, bachelor's degree, with the master's, and you're able to kind of do both at the same time. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. So let's sort of start. What are these degrees about? Some of you probably know to some extent what these degrees entail because you're working in the field, you're majoring in the area. But really what it does is, if you want to be a leader, you want to be a manager, you want to make decisions in an organization, you want to analyze information, you want to make policy better, more efficient, easier to understand. You want to create access to education, to healthcare, to clean water, whatever it might be. These are the kinds of degrees that allow you to really bring up, a passion for policy, government, diplomacy, advocacy. All of those kinds of things really are put together in these kinds of graduate programs. So you can really contribute to systems and make them work better and more efficiently. And that's across the disciplines, from political science. Perhaps you have an interest in elections or lobbying. Maybe you're interested in criminal justice and you really want to make the court system work better, or you're interested in youth social justice issues. As I mentioned, maybe you're interested in education and making it more accessible and better across inner cities. Maybe you're interested in making sure everyone has access to healthcare in a meaningful way. Maybe you want to help people who are immigrating to this country navigate that process, help refugees who are settling here. These are all of the kinds of things you can do with these degrees. And it really applies to pretty much every level of government. So that's from local government, which is like a city, a town, a county, to state government, like here in Albany at a state capital, to the federal government in DC or around the country, because there are federal offices pretty much everywhere, as well as nonprofit organizations. I'm sure some of you have volunteered your time over the years, so places like Habitat for Humanity or the Red Cross. There are also non-governmental organizations that are, some are sort of like independent organizations that are checking the government for accountability. Some are focused around foreign and international affairs. For any of you considering, you're like, I want to be part of the UN, I want to be a foreign service officer, a diplomat. These are the kinds of degrees that can prepare you to do that. So it's a really exciting time to think about all of the ways that you can take your degree and then go do it and go make the world better. And it's exciting. So I won't go super in depth, just because, most of you kind of know, I think, have some sense probably of what a master's degree looks like in terms of requirements. Most take, if you're a full-time student having graduated, it's usually like a 2-year process. I'll talk about the accelerated option. But most have, probably 8 or so core classes. And those are your foundations courses, your statistics courses I mentioned, as the MPA and the MIA both have stats requirements. You'll learn a little bit about public budgeting. You might learn about American politics and how the American political system works in political science. You'll understand how the criminal justice system works in the United States and CJ, but you might also learn about how public finance works. How do you fund governments? How do you fund nonprofit organizations? If you're interested in, international development, you want to create relationships between countries that can have both countries perhaps benefit from one plan to make something better between them. They can share resources, etc. So these are all the kinds of things that you get to do. And as I mentioned, with a practically based major in like international affairs or public administration, you really get to do real policy work in your classes, take those solutions and apply them to the real world. So you're learning about actual crises, actual problems, actual issues that occur in everyday government. And it really is a meaningful part of the master's degrees to say, okay, we're learning about this in class, but we're also going to attack the problem and figure out how to solve it, or at least create some solutions that could potentially solve the problem. And so you'll know, not only once you go to your internship, but once you go out into the world and get a full-time job, that you've done that sort of exciting work of figuring out what the solutions are. So there's a lot of great opportunities within these programs. Many of them, for the MIA and the MPA, they actually require an internship. So when you graduate, you will have done a professional internship. And so what that means is this is not an internship you're doing now as an undergrad. You're actually doing it as a graduate student. And so what that means is you're looked at as a real full-time staff member. You get to do some really meaningful work. We've had students work on like the UN Program Development Fund. We've had students work on like the Medicare redesign in New York State. We've had students work on Homeland Security and emergency services issues. So there's some really exciting opportunities to take advantage of doing your internship with those programs. And then you of course get to do some electives as well. We want you to obviously take those core classes, but we want you to be able to take courses that interest you in a specific area. So you'll choose, as I mentioned, some of those concentrations that you can pick from, and then take classes that cater to that interest. So you're like, I really am passionate about public policy. I want to make sure I take a class in environmental policy. Great, let's make sure you do that. And that really goes across the 4 master's programs. You've got a lot of flexibility to be able to do that. I would say the most flexibility in electives are in political science and criminal justice. It's slightly less prescribed than the professional programs, with intention. But there are a little bit more opportunity for sort of more general electives, while the MPA and MIA offer you that opportunity. It's a little bit more structured because you want to do that internship. We want to make sure you're giving those professional skills, experiences, etc. So that's sort of a general overview of the master's degree programs. And of course, we have PhD programs. We have graduate certificate programs, which is sort of a smaller credential, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions about those degrees if students have them. Most students in your position, you're doing an internship, you're thinking about a master's degree, so that's sort of why I'm focusing in that area. But by all means, if you have questions about other things, let me know. So here at Albany, we have a unique opportunity for you to start a master's degree while you're still an undergraduate student. So for those of you who are juniors, you have time. For those of you who are sophomores, if any of you, most of the students who apply to what we call our combined program, the BA MPA, the BA MIA, the BA MA, you can apply typically in spring of your junior year. And then if you've got a full senior year ahead of you, you can take up to 12 credits. So that's usually 3 or 4 classes within the master's degree that you take as a senior. And if you're graduating early, if you've got an internship you're doing semester in Washington, those types of things can impact this. So we'll make sure we can talk about that, but it's still typically possible to do. So I know the timeline can be slightly different for certain students, but for sort of a traditional path, it's typically apply during second semester junior year, take graduate courses your senior year. Those courses not only are taken at the undergraduate tuition rate, so it's like twice the amount to take grad classes normally, but you guys get this great financial benefit to take them at the undergraduate tuition rate. And then it also counts toward both your bachelor's degree and your master's degree. So you're not taking double classes, you're taking the same number of classes and they count for both. So it's a really nice advantage to essentially get a full semester or more worth of credits done in your master's program before you officially graduate from your 4-year degree. And then once you do graduate, you sort of join us officially as a grad student, and you take at least a semester off the MIA or the MPA, and you'll actually be able to do the MA in 1 year. So it does offer you a little bit more time and flexibility, offers a little bit of a financial benefit. And we do require a few things for that. So for the programs, we do require at least a 3.2 overall GPA. And for the MPA and the MIA, we're back to that quantitative piece again, is we do require 2 classes in that area. Like I said, I usually recommend PAD 316, Echo 110, I think is micro. Those are the 2 classes I think that are probably best in terms of preparing you for what's ahead. And you need to have at least 56 credits completed, which technically puts you at the end of your sophomore year, but I usually recommend students holding off until they've taken at least a semester of their junior year, just to give a little bit more more credits from their major under their belt, so they're sort of ready to go for graduate level courses. So for those who were like, wow, this sounds great, it's what a great option. There's a few deadlines I'll throw out at you. The MAs are a little more flexible. Like we're in January or we're in February now. You could apply to either of the MAs really at any time. The BA, MPA, and MIA, we like students to kind of do that all at once to make it a little bit easier. But you're welcome to really apply at any time. We just sort of put these as so students have a sense in their head, like, okay, I'm going to get myself together by April 1st to have a conversation with Zahar or Dr. Fox. And then by May 1st, that's a great deadline because that gives us a couple of weeks to get you a decision, and you can still go back and like change your fall schedule without too much of an issue. So those are the kinds of things that we want to have you start thinking about if you're going to apply this semester. You can apply in the fall of your senior year. That's perfectly okay. And that deadline's December 1st. So you can really pick the timeline that works best for you. And if you're not sure, just reach out. I'm more than happy to talk to you about that process, because sometimes students don't decide. It might be like June and they're like, oh geez, you know what? I kind of want to apply to the combined program. Great, we can talk about it. And then the application checklist is pretty standard. The one thing I'll point out that kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier is the letters of recommendation. This is why it's really important to get to know your faculty, because at least one of those recommendations has to be from a faculty member in Rockefeller, so or in criminal justice. So someone who's taught you, who can sort of speak to your ability to not only be a good grad student, but truly have success in the program, because that's what we're looking for. So we want you to get to know your faculty well enough that they can sort of speak to all of your great strengths when they write you a letter. So for some of you, maybe you're seniors, maybe you're like, I'm double majoring, I'm studying abroad, I'm doing all these things, I'm not going to have time to do a combined program. That's okay too. You can certainly apply as a regular student. You can apply really at any point during your senior year for the following fall. So we encourage students to do it by February 1st, but you do have some flexibility in that. Very similar in terms of the application requirements. And that we will usually turn around decisions in about 3 to 4 weeks. So we try to get them to you fairly quickly, but you can always apply sort of what we call the regular way, that like, okay, I know I'm graduating in say May of 27. I'm going to apply for fall of 27. You don't have to apply to the combined program. It's just a nice way to kind of get started if you're thinking about grad school already and you kind of know that's the direction you want to go. So there's a couple slides that I think are helpful just to give you a sense of where students have gone, what internships have they had, what types of jobs have they had. And I think this is a good selection. By no means is this exhaustive. We have students across the country, across the world, you name it. But it's a good kind of cross-section of U.S. departments, of New York State departments, of nonprofit organizations, things like the UN, working for legal aid. One of the things I often mention to students, because I talked obviously about law school earlier, is that you don't always need a law degree to work in the legal field. There are a number of like MPA students, for instance, who work actually here, the Global Network for Public Interest Law. That's a perfect example. We had a student who graduated from the MPA who works in that area. So she's doing sort of nonprofit legal work with an MPA. So there are a lot of interesting alternatives you can do. You know, if you want to be a practicing lawyer, by all means, do your law degree, but there are some great alternatives to that with something like an MPA or an MIA degree. So something kind of just to kind of keep in mind. And then this is sort of a selection of like, what are titles of people in these jobs? And they vary. As I'm sure Christina and Joan have said, it's an interesting, you're not just an accountant, you're not just a teacher, have sort of simple titles that make sense to people. They can be sort of, complicated. So we always give students a sense of what that might mean. Like a compliance officer, what does that person do? Or a finance manager, or someone who is a budget fellow. I mean, these are all great titles and come with really interesting responsibilities. But one of the reasons I show this slide is because I think sometimes students aren't sure what these are. And so my advice to you is to say, I don't think I have any interest in compliance, so I don't think I'm going to apply for that job. I always encourage you to reach out and ask some questions. Talk to Christina, talk to Joan, find out what these kinds of jobs do, because sometimes a student will find like, oh, I'm not going to apply for that position because that job title doesn't interest me, or that based on that quick description, I'm not I'm not interested. Find out a little bit more about the position, because sometimes students find that they are able to discover something new or learn something new by taking a chance on a position they didn't think that they'd want to apply to. And that goes as well for an internship, perhaps that wasn't the perfect placement. I think students find that there's sort of two things that can happen. They take an internship that wasn't their first choice, and then they end up finding that, wow, this is really exciting and interesting, and I've discovered something new I want to pursue. Or on the other side, maybe it's something you're like, okay, I got valuable experience out of that, but I now know that's not the path for me. Just as valuable. We really encourage students to explore some of those options, because we want you to be able to try it out, test the waters, see what's out there. And that's one of the great things about having the flexibility of being part of Rockefeller, of doing an internship, of getting out there and doing some practical work and speaking with mentors in the field. I'm sure you've all met alums from our programs wherever you're interning, because they're everywhere. Take advantage of that, because they can be really valuable resources as you sort of navigate the next few years and figure out sort of the best path for you. So I realize that's a lot of information in a very short amount of time, but I didn't want to take up too much time from your class, and I did want to make sure that if you had questions, that I was of course able to answer them. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you might have at this point.
Thank you so much, Jaclyn. No, we really appreciate it. What I'll do is I'm just going to stop the recording and then we can open it
Okay,
up for questions if that sounds good to you.
sounds good.
All right.